Seeking Wisdom, Week 37, the Book of Sirach and Wisdom. These two books are combined in our lesson for a very simple reason. In both of these books, a search for wisdom is a main theme, and both were composed at almost the same time. While reading these books, we are directed to seek wisdom in God, who is the source of all wisdom. Sirach was composed in the Hebrew language by Jesus, the son of Sirach. The books of Prophets and Sirach are the only books in the Old Testament where the author of the book is known. Chapter 50, verse 27 has the name of the author, which was included because of a practice by the Greeks at the time the book was wrote. In the 4th century, St. Jerome was still able to read the book of Sirach in its original language. Unfortunately, the text of this book was lost until the late 19th century, and in 1896, 2/3 of the Hebrew version was found near an ancient synagogue in Cairo, with other important passages found in 1964, which showed the manuscripts in Cairo were accurate. The author of Sirach, a scribe even in his childhood, is an intellectual man from Jerusalem that showed an honest passion for the law of Moses. His main interest was always conveying his knowledge and experience to others, especially when he was a young aristocrat in Jerusalem. With many years of experience, the book was written and revised many times, but after he was satisfied with the final product, the book was published. When the book was published, it was meant for those living abroad who wished for the wisdom of God and wanted to live according to the law. Sirach was an open-minded man and did not hesitate to try the experiences and true essence of the new culture. However, he was very worried about the future of Judaism and wanted to deal with the threat of the Greek traditions being forced on them in a way that would stand the test of time. So with an open mind and a clear foresight, he understood his people were living in a time of change and disruption, but wanted to keep the key components of Judaism so they could understand the path they were being led down. In the book, you will see that he harmonizes the traditional morality and the common wisdom of humanity, which was deepened only through his own experiences. The book of Sirach becomes a life manual for the Jews who want to maintain their identity in the midst of a rapidly changing world. It is in the words of Sirach that they can find comfort and practical advice, allowing them to remain faithful to God and their people. With their faith in God and their love of God, the Jews never once completely surrendered to the Hellenistic movement. They fought through strong external pressure and a decline in Judaism and held strong to their faith. What can we learn from the book of Sirach? Well, it follows a long tradition of Israel, and generally speaking, shows a strong influence from the book of Job and Proverbs. So first, let's look at wisdom. Sirach chapter 24 shows us that wisdom comes from the mouth of the Most High, and everything that is said just confirms what has already been said. As far as human destiny and the issue of reward and punishment, the author simply restated all of the words of his predecessors. He exalts the happiness of the sage, but he is haunted by the thought of death and knows that it all depends on it, for it is easy for the Lord on the day of death to reward individuals according to their conduct. And it could be said he had a moral sense of the end, but he did not yet know how God would reward people. Because he placed such an ideological limit on what he wrote, emphasis was placed on death, saying, "Do not rejoice over anyone's death. Remember that we must all die." One of the most important lessons we can learn from Sirach is wisdom should be identified with the law of Moses, and Sirach showed us exactly how to merge the two so we can all benefit from both. Another important lesson we can take from the book of Sirach is that the law is to obey the details of the liturgy carefully, or in other words, we need to follow the laws and seek wisdom. When we obey these laws, we realize that the righteous and the wise are one and the same, someone that fears God and does what he asks of us. And finally, we learn Sirach is a representative of the virtuous people who later defend their faith against King Antiochus IV to the very end. And it is groups of the Israelites that hold tight to their faith and establish the grounds for the coming of Christ. The Book of Wisdom, unlike the Book of Sirach, is written entirely in Greek, proving to be rich, flexible, and contains a natural form of rhetoric. This book was used by the fathers of the church right up to the 2nd century AD, and in particular by St. Jerome, who recognized this book as a divine masterpiece along with other books of the canon. The Book of Wisdom consists of 3 distinct parts. Part 1, which covers chapters 1 to 5, presents the role of wisdom in human destiny and compares the fate of the righteous with the infidel in life and life after death. Part 2, which covers chapters 6 to 9, describes the origin and nature of wisdom and how to acquire the needed wisdom. And Part 3, covering chapters 10 to 19, covers praising the action of wisdom and of God in the history of the chosen people, most notably their liberation from the slavery of Egypt. Smacked right in the middle of this last part is chapters 13 to 15 that tells of the foolishness of idolatry and the consequences that arise from it. Who wrote the Book of Wisdom? Well, at one time there were thoughts that it was King Solomon because there are clear references to this idea, and even the Greek title has the Wisdom of Solomon in it. But this was a common practice of Greek literature. They would add the name of a highly regarded person to a title. Although this book was written in Greek and it was most definitely written by a Jew, the author has a profound knowledge of the Bible, believes in the God of his father, is proud to belong to the holy people, but he also understands Greek culture, knowing Greek philosophy, characteristics, and movements. Judging by the writing styles of the author, it is believed that they lived in Alexandria because of the emphasis on the Exodus, the intermingling of Egypt and Greece, the large Jewish movement, and especially the attitude towards animal worship, which only existed in Egypt at the time. We should also bring to your attention that the author was not a philosopher or a theologian, but was an Israelite sage. So, just like his predecessors, he advised people to seek wisdom, wisdom that came from God through prayer. But more than his predecessors, he linked this wisdom with science. The topic of reward and punishment, which was often a headache for sages, was made clear by the author of Wisdom. Think about the books we have studied in the past. People only ever have a vague idea of the underworld. This was where the soul lived away from God and was bored. And all people knew was that there was a reason for reward and punishment, but there were never clear, concise answers given. And then, along comes the author of Wisdom. And it is made clear that God's justice transcends this worldly boundary with a limited amount of happiness and suffering and passes into the afterlife. Because the author knows how to apply the philosophical concept of the distinction between body and soul, and the immortality of the soul affirms that God creates people so they will not be corrupted and immortalized. This indestructibility is a reward of wisdom, giving man a place with God and clarifying that what happens in this life is preparation for what happens in the next life, and this is also when the infidel is deservedly punished. The author does not imply the resurrection of the body, but leaves the question almost unanswered about the resurrected body in a spiritual form, which links the Greek concept of immortality with the Bible doctrine of the resurrected body in the book of Daniel. Just as in books written before Wisdom, it shows us that wisdom is an attribute of God, who is the wisdom of wisdom and set up all things when the universe was created and has been guiding events of history ever since. Throughout the Book of Wisdom, we realize that wisdom comes from God and radiates in the glory of the Almighty, and it reflects eternal light as the image of the mercy of God. For she is a breath of the power of God and a pure emanation of the glory of the Almighty. Therefore, nothing defiled gains entrance into her. The author of Sirach wrote of the history of Israel before the author of Wisdom, but there are two distinct differences. First, in wisdom, the author wants to interpret the facts and draw from it a religious philosophy of history, and second, he draws a biblical story into the book to prove the truth of it. In chapters 16 to 19, you will read about a contrast between the fate of the Egyptians and that of the Israelites. And in order to highlight these differences, the author links the stories and exaggerates events. Even though these ancient pages have been around for more than 2,000 years, chapters 1 to 9 still offers Christians spiritual nourishment. In conclusion, we would like you to listen to the most beautiful text taken from chapter 3 of the Book of Sirach, which is about filial piety and our duties towards our parents. Listen to me, your father, O children. Act accordingly, that you may be kept in safety. For the Lord honors a father above his children, and he confirms a mother's right over her children. Those who honor their father atone for sins, and those who respect their mother are like those who lay up treasure. Those who honor their father will have joy in their own children, and when they pray, they will be heard. Those who respect their father will have long life, and those who honor their mother obey the Lord. They will serve their parents as their masters. Honor your father by word and deed, that this blessing may come upon you. For a father's blessing strengthens the houses of the children, but a mother's curse uproots their foundations. Do not glorify yourself by dishonoring your father, for your father's dishonor is no glory to you. The glory of one's father is one's own glory, and it is a disgrace for children not to respect their mother. My child, help your father in his old age and do not grieve him as long as he lives. Even if his mind fails, be patient with him. Because you have all your faculties, do not despise him. For kindness to a father will not be forgotten and will be credited to you against your sins. In the day of your distress, it will be remembered in your favor. Like frost in fair weather, your sins will melt away. Whoever forsakes a father is like a blasphemer, and whoever angers a mother is cursed by the Lord. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this week's lesson. Remember, every Friday, the Seeking Wisdom Challenge will be posted on YouTube and Facebook. If you enjoyed this lesson, please like, share, or subscribe to this channel. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, and we wish you a wonderful weekend full of grace and joy.